We've actually hit kind of a unique point today. Being that, well, we've kind of already covered the origins of both the Incredible Hulk and Wolverine, it doesn't leave that much to give in terms of background information.
I even thought about talking about the work of Bruce Jones, the man who was writing the Incredible Hulk title at the time this series was published. But since we're going to be covering much of that run in the future, I decided to put that off until then.
So the best idea I could really come up with was to try and explain a little bit about the rivalry between the two characters.
To me, the rivalry between the Incredible Hulk and Wolverine is kind of like the rivalry between the NFL's Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens. See, both teams have a reputation for hard-nosed physical defense alongside a blue-collar-esque offense.
In other words, the reason the two teams hate each other is, well, because they're so much alike. And I think the same thing applies to both Hulk and Wolverine.
Both characters are often depicted as wayward souls, loners who wish for an inner peace, only to be undone by the lack of anger management, which often just alienates the people they wish to let in the most.
So the Hulk and Wolverine have clashed on many occasions throughout the years. Some of their battles have been regarded as true classics, while others, not so much. In 2003, writer Bruce Jones and artist Scott Collins contributed to the rivalry with a 4-issue miniseries called Hulk Wolverine 6 Hours. Now, I don't know about you, but could you possibly think of any other reason to release a Hulk Wolverine series in 2003? And with that, let's start Hulk Wolverine 6 Hours.
Out in the Canadian wilderness, Wolverine arrives at a small cabin for some much-needed R&R. As this is happening, Bruce Banner sets about sneaking onto a private charter jet to Canada. Also on board are two drug dealers named White and Sid, who just swindled a crime syndicate out of their supplies and money. Finally, there's a teenager named Kyle Hatcher. Kyle had recently gotten into an argument with his mother and stepfather over the fact that he was upset about having to leave his collection of pet snakes while being away at a summer camp.
I remind you that Kyle here is supposed to be getting on a plane. Now, I know summer camp is supposed to be well out of town, hence the whole term of camp, but I don't know if I've ever heard of one that was so far away from a home that it necessitated air travel.
Before he left, Kyle stopped to feed his pet king snake, Sammy, only for Sammy to suddenly bite him. Kyle assured his mother that everything was okay, as king snakes are not venomous. However, not long after takeoff, Kyle begins to get sick. Bruce Banner notices this and begins inspecting the bite. He uses the contact list on Kyle's phone to contact Mrs. Hatcher. It turns out that the snake that bit Kyle was not Sammy. It was Kyle's pet coral snake.
Now, coral snakes actually are venomous, and the comic actually reiterates this friendly little rhyme to help you remember. Red and black, friend to Jack. Red and yellow kills a fellow.
Banner goes up to the plane's cabin and asks them to prepare an emergency landing. However, White is having none of it and pulls out a gun. Bruce tries to talk White down, but just gets pistol-whipped for good measure. And that begins to make Bruce angry.
And nobody likes it when Bruce Banner gets angry.
The resulting Hulk transformation causes the plane to crash. Wolverine hears about the events over his handheld radio. Banner comes to in the wreckage of the plane and begins to look for survivors. There are 4 left. The pilot, whose name is Margie, White, Sid, and Kyle, but he's only barely alive. The 4 have already left the crash site, and Sid and White have taken the pilot hostage. Despite Margie's pleas to go to a nearby hospital for Kyle, White and Sid are trying to find a contact of theirs who lives in a cabin at a nearby lake. As this is happening, Sid and White's former cartel bosses call for someone to find the 2 drug dealers. Meanwhile, Banner is still searching for Kyle and any other survivors. He does find something, namely a mountain lion. Bruce's adrenaline begins to pump and he begins to Hulk out once more when Wolverine arrives to scare the Panther off. Banner decks the Hulk as he struggles to keep the Hulk at bay. Eventually, Bruce calms down enough and explains the situation to Wolverine. The 2 then set off as Wolverine can use his mutant tracking skills to locate Kyle and the others. Back with the others, White and Sid hold up an elderly couple for their RV and begin heading towards the home of their contact. Unbeknownst to them, their contact has already been killed by the cartel's hired gun, a man known as the Shredder.
Sorry guys, but I don't think the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are going to be making a cameo appearance in this one.
The Shredder then goes after the old couple whose RV was jacked by White and Sid. Sometime later, Banner and Logan arrive at the scene, and Logan recognizes the Shredder's scent. Back in the RV, Margie says she's preparing a shot of adrenaline for Kyle. In reality, though, she's prepared a sedative, which she uses on White. White loses control of the RV and it goes over the side of a cliff. Somehow, all 4 individuals inside survive the crash, though White has a severed spine. Sid holds Maggie at gunpoint and makes her carry Kyle to the cabin. A while later, Shredder comes by and kills White. Banner and Wolverine find White's body, and Logan fills Bruce in on his history with the Shredder. Logan also discovers Sid and Margie's tracks and begins piecing together what the Shredder is really after. Sid and Margie arrive at the lake where the Contact is supposed to be based, though Sid is still unaware of the Contact's death. Sid then turns his gun on Margie, and it's then that the Shredder arrives and he rips Sid apart with the claws on his one augmented hand. Shredder then turns his attention to Margie, and she manages to convince the killer that she knows of a secret vault in town. Shredder agrees to spare her, and the two begin rowing across the lake. It's then that Banner and Wolverine arrive, and Logan uses a lake dock as a ramp to jump towards the boat in the lake. In the midst of the fight between Wolverine and the Shredder, Kyle is thrown from the raft. As Banner dives after Kyle, the raft runs aground. Banner pulls Kyle from the lake with only a few minutes left before the antivenom's use would be pointless. Meanwhile, Wolverine leads Shredder away from the others, and Logan manages to gain the upper hand when he suddenly stops and begins walking away. It's then a mountain lion appears and finishes Shredder off. Logan returns to the others, and Bruce explains that it's too late. They will never make it to a hospital in time to save Kyle. Wolverine points out that they could use a blood transfusion if he finds a coral snake and has it bite him. Banner points out that Wolverine's healing factor would just cause the venom to be expelled. Margie volunteers, but she's lost too much blood through the minor cuts and scrapes she's had throughout these events. That leaves only Bruce Banner, even if the stress from the bite and the transfusion would result in the Hulk returning.
Okay, first things first. I have no idea how accurate the science is here concerning a blood transfusion working on a venomous snake bite. And second, if you know your comics history, then you know that Bruce Banner giving a blood transfusion to his cousin Jennifer Walters is what enabled her to transform into the She-Hulk. So, wouldn't the same hold true for Kyle here? No, that's actually somebody else.
Wolverine rushes out and manages to find a coral snake. He brings it back just as Bruce and Margie finish setting up the transfusion equipment. Banner has the snake bite him and begins the transfusion. Margie injects Bruce with some adrenaline to assist the transfusion, and Bruce begins trying to keep the Hulk at bay. It fails, and the Hulk bursts out of the cabin and immediately begins fighting Wolverine. However, the fight is stopped when both of them realize that Kyle is alive and well, though he's not a Hulk. Later, Kyle calls his mother to inform her that he's okay, and he got to meet the Hulk and Wolverine. Meanwhile, Bruce and Logan argue over which of the two Margie was actually attracted to the whole time.
And that concludes Hulk Wolverine 6 hours. How was it? Well, I really liked it. I think there's some really good drama, some nice, tightly paced storytelling. Scott Collins' artwork is really good. And, you know, in a time when people keep complaining about the lack of new characters coming out of the big two, Marvel and DC, we actually got a new character in the form of the Shredder. Now, that being said, there are a couple drawbacks. I mean, for a series called Hulk Wolverine, there's a surprising lack of both the Hulk and Wolverine in this. And while we did get a new villain in the Shredder, he really wasn't that interesting. But, like I said, I did enjoy this, and if you could actually track a copy down, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. I'm going to give Hulk Wolverine 6 hours a B. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.